The doors of the Grand Assembly Hall opened with a sound like distant thunder. Captain Tae-won stepped inside, and every conversation stopped. The hall was massive. Its walls were made of crystal that caught the light from 3 suns and scattered it into rainbows across the floor. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that rose up like an amphitheater. Some had fur, some had scales, some were made of pure light contained in special suits. All of them turned to look at the human who had just entered. Tae-won's armor was a disaster. The chest plate had a crack running from shoulder to hip. The right shoulder piece was completely missing, leaving exposed the damaged underlayer beneath. Scorch marks covered nearly every surface, black and brown and dark red. The left leg joint sparked occasionally, making a small popping sound with each step. The helmet's visor had a spider web of cracks across it. He looked like someone who had crawled out of an explosion. Which, in fact, he had. The whispers started immediately. They rippled through the hall like wind through grass. Tae-won heard them even through his damaged helmet. The translator built into his armor fed him the words in a dozen different languages at once. Is that their warrior? Look at the state of his equipment. Primitives. I told you they were primitives. How did he even survive long enough to get here? Ambassador Yu-jin sat in the human delegation section. Her hands gripped together so tightly her knuckles were white. She had fought for 3 years to get humanity a seat at this council. 3 years of careful diplomacy, of proving that Earth deserved to be recognized as an equal among the galactic powers. And now Tae-won walked in looking like he had been through a garbage compactor. She wanted to scream. She wanted to explain. But the rules of the tribunal were absolute. She could not speak until called upon. A being of pure energy floated forward from the Vrelian section. Its body was contained in armor that looked like it had been grown rather than built. All smooth curves and perfect lines. Not a scratch on it. Not a dent. It shimmered with inner light. Is this truly the best Earth can send? The Vrelian asked. Its voice echoed in the hall, musical and mocking. A beggar in broken toys. We heard tales of the human resistance at the Krell Nebula. Tales of great courage and strength. But looking at this, I think perhaps those tales were exaggerated. Laughter erupted from several sections. The Kethrian warlord, whose black carapace gleamed like polished stone, clicked his mandibles in what Tae-won's translator told him was contemptuous amusement. A group of crystalline beings from the far side of the hall actually chimed, their bodies ringing like bells with their laughter. Tae-won stood in the center of the hall and said nothing. His broken visor gave nothing away. He simply stood at attention, waiting. The laughter continued for almost a full minute. Yu-jin felt each second like a knife. She had known this would be difficult. The other species looked down on humanity. They always had. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, their technologies centuries behind the others. But she had hoped that Tae-won's actions would speak louder than appearances. Now she was not so sure. A massive creature rose from the Krell section. The Krell matriarch stood over 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and a face that looked like it belonged on an ancient Earth insect. Her exoskeleton was a deep purple, marked with the scars of 100 battles, but those scars were worn with pride, displayed like medals. They did not make her look weak, they made her look dangerous. Silence, the matriarch commanded. The hall obeyed. We are not here for laughter. We are here for justice. She pointed one clawed hand at Tae-won. This human stands accused of mass murder, of genocide, of crimes so terrible that his species should be cast out of this council and his colonies stripped away. He destroyed the Krell Fortress Station at the Krell Nebula. 12,000 of my people died in that explosion. Engineers, scientists, children learning in our education centers. Her voice grew louder. And he did this with full knowledge of what he was doing. He murdered my people. And he did not even have the courage to die with them. He ran. He survived, and now he comes here in his broken armor, thinking we will have pity on him. More murmurs rippled through the hall. Some species looked shocked. Others looked satisfied, as if this confirmed what they had always believed about humans. A Therian delegate, whose people resembled great cats with 6 legs, spoke up. Perhaps his armor is broken because he is a coward. Perhaps he ran from battle and was damaged in his retreat. The Vrelian laughed again. Or perhaps human technology is simply so inferior that even their military equipment falls apart under normal use. I have seen human ships, they are held together with welds and prayers. More laughter. Even some of the species who had been silent before joined in now. Eugen stood up. Every eye turned to her. The tribunal will hear the accused's testimony, she said, her voice shaking only slightly. That is the law. Whatever you think of his appearance, Captain Tae-won has the right to speak in his own defense. The head judge, an ancient being whose species had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years, nodded slowly. The ambassador is correct. The accused will be given the opportunity to testify. Captain Tae-won, do you wish to make a statement? Tae-won's helmet turned slightly. Even through the cracked visor, Eugen could feel him looking at her. Then he looked back at the judge. I do, he said. His voice was quiet but clear. But first, I request permission to remove my armor. The hall fell silent again. But this time, it was a different silence. A confused one. The Vrelian laughed again. He wishes to show us his weakness even more clearly? To prove that his body is as broken as his equipment? The Kethrian warlord clicked his mandibles. Perhaps he hopes we will pity him if we see how injured he is. A clever strategy, for a primitive. The judge looked at Tae-won for a long moment. This is unusual. Why do you wish to remove your armor? Because the truth is written on it, Tae-won said simply. And you cannot see it properly from where you sit. The judge conferred quietly with two other judges. Finally, he nodded. Permission granted. You may remove your armor and present your testimony. Tae-won stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by aliens who thought him weak, who thought him a coward, who thought his damaged armor was proof of his failure. He reached up and touched the release catches on his helmet, and the hall, which had been full of mockery and laughter, began to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The Krell matriarch stepped forward to present her case. A holographic display materialized in the center of the hall, floating above Tae-won's head. It showed a massive space station, dark metal, and bristling with weapons. The Krell Fortress Station. This was our home, the matriarch said. Her voice was tight with grief and anger. For 200 years, this station served as a center of learning and defense. Our finest engineers worked here. Our children studied here. It was a place of knowledge and protection. The hologram shifted. Now it showed ships, hundreds of them, arranged in defensive formations around the station. The Krell fleet. Their vessels were sleek and deadly, covered in the same purple-black armor as the matriarch herself. On the date in question, our fleet detected an intrusion in the Krell Nebula. A single human frigate. The vessel was designated the Indomitable. She said the name like it was poison. We sent communications. We ordered them to leave. They refused. The hologram changed again. Now it showed a small ship, battered and worn even before the battle started. The Indomitable looked nothing like the elegant Krell vessels. It was a box with engines, covered in mismatched hull plates and repair work. It looked like something built in a scrapyard. This ship, the matriarch continued, attacked our fleet. One ship against hundreds. It was suicide. It was insanity. And it was murder. The hologram began to play footage from the battle. Tae-won stood motionless below it, watching his own actions play out above his head. The assembly watched with him. The Indomitable moved through space like a wounded animal, dodging and weaving between Krell ships. It fired missiles, lasers, anything it had. Krell ships exploded in blooms of orange fire. But more ships kept coming. The Indomitable's shields flickered and died. Its hull began to tear apart under the weapon's fire. Our fleet was winning, the matriarch said. This human and his crew were about to be destroyed. Justice would have been served. But then he did this. The hologram showed the Indomitable, burning and broken, suddenly accelerate. It crashed through the defensive line like a meteor. Ships scattered to avoid it. And then the small human frigate fired a single projectile at the station. The hologram went white. When the light faded, the Krell Fortress station was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of debris and fire. 12,000 lives ended in a flash. The hall was silent. "This human murdered my people," the matriarch said. Her forearms were shaking. He knew exactly what he was doing. Our station's reactor was designed to be impervious to attack. But he found a way. He studied our designs, found the weakness, and exploited it. This was not a battle. This was an execution. She turned to face Taewon directly. And when he was done, when he had murdered 12,000 souls, do you know what he did? He ran. His crew abandoned ship in escape pods, and he followed them. He did not stay to face justice. He did not accept the consequences of his actions. He fled like the coward he is. The prosecutor, a being from a species humanity had never met before, stepped forward. The evidence is clear. Captain Tai-1 of Earth deliberately targeted a civilian station. He caused mass casualties with full knowledge and planning. Under galactic law, this is genocide. The punishment is expulsion from the Council and revocation of all Earth colonies in disputed space. Yujin wanted to object. She wanted to stand up and shout the truth. But the rules were absolute. Only the accused could speak in their own defense. She had to trust that Taewon would explain, that the tribunal would listen. But looking at the faces around her, at the anger and disgust in their expressions, she was not sure they would. A video screen lit up in the corner of the hall. A young woman appeared on it, her face pale and drawn. She wore a hospital gown. And behind her, medical equipment beeped and hummed. Lieutenant Hana, Taewon's second in command. She had requested to be present via remote link from the medical station where she was recovering from her injuries. The tribunal had allowed it, though she could not speak unless called as a witness. Hana watched the hologram replay the station's destruction. Tears ran down her face. But they were not tears of shame. They were tears of rage at what was being said. The Vrelian ambassador floated forward. "I must say, I am not surprised. Humans are new to space warfare. They do not understand the rules of engagement. They fight like animals, all instinct and no honor." He gestured at Taewon's damaged armor. "Look at him. He cannot even maintain his equipment properly. Is it any wonder he resorted to such tactics?" A murmur of agreement went through several sections of the hall. The Kethrian warlord stood. "In my culture, we value strength, but there is a difference between strength and brutality. This human displayed no courage in battle. When faced with superior force, he did not fight with honor. He struck at the defenseless, at children. This is not the action of a warrior. This is the action of vermin." More agreement. More nods. The tide of the room was turning against not just Taewon, but against all of humanity. Yujin saw her 3 years of diplomatic work crumbling. Earth would be cast out. The human colonies would be abandoned. Millions of people would suffer because of this moment. The head judge spoke. "Captain Taewon, you have heard the charges. You have seen the evidence. The tribunal requires your testimony. You have requested to remove your armor. You may proceed." Taewon reached up to his helmet. His hands were steady despite everything. The magnetic seals hissed as they released. He lifted the helmet off his head. The first thing the assembly saw was his face. He was young, maybe 30 Earth years, but his face carried scars that aged him. A burn ran from his left temple down to his jaw, leaving the skin puckered and discolored. His hair was cut short, and patches of it were missing where the burn continued onto his scalp. His eyes were dark and deep, carrying a weight that made several delegates uncomfortable. This was not the face of a coward, but it was also not the face of a hardened killer. It was something else. Something that made the mockery die in the throats of those who had been ready to laugh. Taewon set the helmet down on the floor beside him. Then he reached for the catches on his chest plate. "Before I explain what happened," he said quietly, I need you to understand something. This armor you have been mocking. Every mark on it, every dent, every scratch. They are not signs of failure. He began to remove the chest plate. It did not come away easily. The metal had fused in places to the layer beneath. He had to pull hard, and the sound of tearing metal echoed in the hall. They are proof, he said. The chest plate came away. The inside was stained dark red with old blood. So much blood that several delegates gasped, but it was the outside that began to tell the story. What had looked like random damage from a distance was something else up close. Each mark had a pattern. Each dent had a purpose. This was not the result of chaotic battle. This was the map of a plan. Tae-won held the chest plate up for the assembly to see. You want to know what happened at the Krell Nebula? He asked. His voice was still quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. You want to know why I destroyed that station? Why my ship is in pieces? And my crew is in medical centers? Across 3 systems. He looked up at the matriarch. I will tell you. But first, you need to understand what this armor survived. Because once you understand that, you will understand everything else. The hall was silent now. The mockery was gone. In its place was something else. Curiosity. And the first stirrings of doubt. Tae-won laid the chest plate on the ground. The sound of metal on crystal floor echoed through the hall. Then he reached for the left arm section of his armor. The seals released with a hiss, and he pulled it away. This mark here, he said, pointing to a deep gouge that ran the length of the forearm. This happened 43 seconds into the battle. A Krell plasma bolt struck the Indomitable's port side. It tore through 3 decks. Atmosphere began venting into space. 47 people were in those sections. He turned the arm piece so everyone could see it clearly. The gouge was not clean. The metal was melted and torn, as if something incredibly hot had tried to rip through it. Deck 7 held our civilian engineers. They were not soldiers. They were mechanics and scientists who maintained our ship. When the hull breached, I ordered them to the escape pods, but the path to the pods went through the damaged section. The Krell fleet had locked weapons on that corridor. Anyone who tried to cross would be in direct line of fire. Quote, Tae-won's voice remained steady. He was not asking for sympathy. He was simply stating facts. I stood in the corridor, in the breach. My armor's shield projected outward, creating a temporary barrier. 43 people ran past me while the Krell fired on my position. This gouge is from the shot that penetrated my shield and struck my arm. The armor held. The people made it to the pods. All 43 survived. He set down the arm piece and reached for the right shoulder section, or rather, where it should have been. There was nothing but the exposed underlayer and damaged connections. The right pauldron is completely gone, he said. That happened at the 2-minute mark. The Krell fleet had begun a bombardment pattern. They were not trying to destroy us anymore. They were trying to keep us busy while they repositioned the fortress. He touched the torn connection points. A plasma cannon hit me directly. The entire shoulder piece vaporized. The heat transfer was enough that my actual shoulder was burned down to the bone. The armor's medical system injected me with enough painkillers to kill most humans. It kept me conscious instead. The matriarch was listening now. Her forearms were still crossed, her posture still angry. But something in her expression had shifted. Why did you not retreat? She asked. Why did you not order your ship to withdraw? Tae-won looked at her directly. Because we had detected what your fortress was doing. You were charging weapons. Planet killer class weapons. And you were aiming them at Threshold 4. Silence. Threshold 4 is a human colony, Tae-won continued. Population 2.3 million. Mostly civilians. Farmers, teachers, families. They had no military defenses. No shields. If your fortress fired, they would all die. The matriarch's mandibles clicked. The fortress would never target civilians. We are not monsters. Your fortress commanders sent us a message, Tae-won said. They told us that if we did not leave the nebula, they would demonstrate Krell power on the nearest human settlement. They gave us 20 minutes to comply. He pointed to the hologram display. Check your records. Battle timestamp 0 hours 4 minutes and 17 seconds. We received a targeting lock warning. Your fortress had acquired Threshold 4. The prosecutor moved to the console. After a moment, the hologram changed. It showed communication logs, Krell military codes, and there, clear as daylight, was the targeting order. The matriarch stared at it. Her purple exoskeleton seemed to pale. No. This cannot be. Our commanders would not. They did, Tae-Won said. His voice was not triumphant. It was tired. Maybe they thought we would run. Maybe they thought it was an empty threat. But the weapons were charging. The targeting was locked. And we had 18 minutes left. He reached down and began working on the leg section. The left leg joint sparked as he manipulated it, but he ignored the small shocks. This joint fused at the 5-minute mark. We had evacuated most of the crew by then, but the Krell boarding parties had breached our lower decks. They were trying to reach the engine room. If they succeeded, they could disable our ship's self-destruct and capture us. The leg section came away, and the assembly could see the damage clearly. The joint was not just fused. It was melted, half the internal mechanisms visible and destroyed. Ensign Dongjun was in the engine room. He was trying to override the containment systems so we could use the reactor as a weapon. But the door controls had failed. The blast door was stuck half open. The Krell were coming, and he had no way to seal himself in to finish the work. Tae-Won's hands were shaking now, just slightly. It was the first sign of emotion he had shown. I reached the door before they did. I used my armor's strength systems to force the door closed. But the motors were damaged. The door would not seal. It would not hold against Krell soldiers, so I held it. He looked at the leg piece in his hands. I stood in the door frame and used my body to keep it closed. My armor began to crush. The pressure on my left leg was enough to fuse the joint solid. I could feel my bones breaking. Dongjun was shouting at me through the comm to move, that it was not worth it. But if I moved, he died. And if he died, we had no way to destroy the fortress. The Kethrian warlord, who had called Tae-Won vermin, stood slowly. How long did you hold the door? 8 minutes and 42 seconds, Tae-Won said. Dongjun finished the override with 17 seconds to spare. When he completed it, the door sealed properly, and I could let go. By then, I could not bend my left leg at all. I had to drag it behind me for the rest of the mission. He set down the leg piece and stood in just the underlayer of his armor. The medical flight suit was visible now, covering his torso and arms. Through the thin material, the assembly could see the outline of trauma gel patches, dozens of them. His entire body was a map of injuries. The burns on the backplate, he said, turning around. The back of his flight suit was darker than the front, stained with something that might have been blood, or might have been burned flesh. Those came at the end. When I reached the fortress reactor core, the Vrelian ambassador, who had laughed the loudest, spoke softly now. Your ship was destroyed by then. How did you reach the fortress? I took an escape pod and crashed it into the station's docking bay. The Krell shot at me the entire way. The pod had no shields. No weapons. I made it by luck. Or maybe, by will. I am still not sure which. He turned back to face the assembly. The fortress reactor was designed to be tamper-proof. You could not just set it to explode. It required manual override. Someone had to physically enter the reactor chamber and force the containment field to collapse. It was a suicide mechanism, meant to prevent capture. The matriarch's voice was barely a whisper. The radiation in that chamber would kill any living being in seconds. Yes, Tae-Won agreed. But my armor was already heavily damaged. The seals were compromised. I was going to die from radiation exposure regardless. So I had nothing to lose. He touched the flight suit covering his chest. I entered the chamber. I reached the control panel, and I set the timer. 17 seconds. That was how long I calculated it would take for everyone to evacuate. My crew in their escape pods. Your engineers and scientists in the station. Even the Krell soldiers who had been trying to kill me. His dark eyes swept across the assembly. I held the containment field in collapse mode for those 17 seconds. The radiation was so intense that my armor began to melt. My skin began to burn. I could feel myself dying one cell at a time. But you survived, the prosecutor said. It was not an accusation anymore. It was wonder. Barely, Taewon said. When the timer reached 0, I used the last of my strength to reach the emergency transport pad. It beamed me directly into space. Into the debris field. My crew found me 4 hours later. The doctors said I should have died. They said, even with the medical technology we have, I should not have survived the radiation exposure. He looked down at his damaged armor, scattered across the crystal floor. But I did survive. Because this armor, which you mocked, which you called broken toys, held together just long enough. Every seal, every plate, every joint did exactly what it was designed to do. It took the damage so I did not have to die. The hall was silent. Even the matriarch had no words. Taewon stood in the center of the hall, wearing only his medical flight suit. The thin material did nothing to hide the extent of his injuries. Burn scars wrapped around his arms like vines. The outline of healing bones showed through the gel patches on his ribs. His left leg stood at a slightly wrong angle, permanently damaged despite the best medical care Earth could provide. He looked fragile, human, mortal, and yet no one in the assembly hall thought he looked weak. Ambassador Yu-jin had tears streaming down her face. She made no effort to hide them. For 3 years, she had fought to prove humanity belonged among the stars. She had argued with diplomats, negotiated with warriors, pleaded with judges. And now, in this moment, Taewon had done what she never could. He had shown them what humans truly were. Not conquerors, not primitives, survivors. The matriarch stepped down from her platform. Her forearms were no longer crossed in anger. They hung at her sides, trembling slightly. She walked across the floor until she stood directly in front of Taewon. The height difference was enormous. She towered over him, more than twice his size. You said you gave 17 seconds for evacuation, she said. Her voice was different now. The rage was gone. My people. You knew they were in that station. You knew they would die if you did not give them time. Why? Taewon met her eyes without flinching. Because they were not my enemy. Your commanders made the decision to target civilians. Your soldiers followed orders. But the engineers, the scientists, the students in your education centers, they were just people, like the people on Threshold 4. I could not save everyone. But I could try to save as many as possible. You nearly died giving them that time, the matriarch said. Yes. Why? Taewon was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. Because someone had to. Because if I did not, millions would die. And because once you decide that some lives matter more than others, you have already lost what makes you worth saving. The video screen in the corner flickered. Lieutenant Hana's face appeared larger now. She had been silent during Taewon's testimony, tears running down her face. But now she spoke. Permission to address the tribunal, she said. Her voice was rough, broken by emotion. The head judge nodded. Granted. Please state your name and rank. Lieutenant Hana, second officer of the Indomitable. I was there. I saw everything. She took a shaky breath. Captain Taewon is not telling you the full story. He is leaving out parts. Because he does not think they matter. But they do. The hologram display changed. Now it showed the interior of the Indomitable during the battle. The footage was from Hana's helmet camera. The ship was burning. Alarms screamed. People ran through smoke-filled corridors. When the Krell breached our hull, the captain ordered immediate evacuation, Hana said. We had lost life support in 6 decks. The engines were failing. We had maybe 10 minutes before the ship tore itself apart. We started loading people into escape pods. The video showed Tae-won, his armor already damaged, directing crew members. His voice on the recording was calm, steady. He was telling people where to go, who to help, making sure no one was left behind. We did not want to go, Hana continued. We were his crew, his family. The idea of leaving him behind was impossible. We argued with him. We refused the order. And do you know what he did? She laughed, but it was a sound full of pain. He pulled rank. He ordered us into the pods. He made it a direct command that we could not disobey, and then he sealed the pod bay doors from the outside so we could not come back for him. The video showed the moment. Tae-won standing on the other side of a closing door, his cracked visor looking back at his crew. And then the door shut, and he was gone. We thought he was dead, Hana said. Her voice broke completely. For 3 days, we thought we had left him to die. We were rescued by a patrol ship and taken to the medical station. The whole time, I kept thinking about that door closing. About how the last thing I saw was his armor, already falling apart. And how I had left him there. She wiped her eyes roughly. And then we got the message. A Krell search and rescue team had found a human in an escape pod, barely alive, floating in the debris field. It was him. He had survived. And the first thing he did when he woke up in the medical center was ask if his crew was safe. The Vrelian ambassador floated forward. His energy form was dim now, subdued. Lieutenant. The captain said he used an escape pod to reach the fortress. But you said he sealed you all in the pod bay. Where did he get a pod? Hana smiled through her tears. There was one left. The command pod. It was the captain's emergency escape. Every ship has one. It is for the captain alone, in case they need to evacuate last. He could have used it immediately. He could have been the first one off the ship, safe and far away. Instead, he used it as a weapon to save millions of people he would never meet. The Kethrian warlord spoke. His voice was completely different from before. The contempt was gone. Lieutenant Hana, you said the captain is leaving parts out. What else has he not told us? Hana looked directly at Tae-won through the video screen. He shook his head slightly, but she ignored him. Threshold 4 was not just a human colony, she said. 3 months before the battle, there was a cultural exchange program. Multiple species sent representatives to learn about human farming techniques and civilian life. There were Krell students there, 53 of them. There were also Kethrian younglings, 312 of them. The Kethrian warlord's carapace seemed to crack. His mandibles opened, but no sound came out. There were Vrelian observers, Hana continued. 22. There were Therian diplomats. 41. When the fortress targeted Threshold 4, it was not just aiming at humans, it was aiming at all of them. At your children. At your people. The hall erupted. Not in mockery this time, but in shock. Species who had been silent before began talking rapidly to each other. The Kethrian section was in chaos, multiple warlords standing and demanding information. The matriarch's forearms went to her head. My students. They were there. They were on that world. Yes, Hana said. Captain Tae-won knew this. He had access to the colony manifests. He knew exactly who would die if that fortress fired, and he decided that every single one of those lives was worth saving, no matter the cost to himself. Another video screen appeared. This one showed a young man in an engineering uniform, his arm in a sling, and his head bandaged. Ensign Dong-jun. I was in the engine room, he said without waiting for permission to speak. The captain held that door for 8 minutes. I was watching the readings. I could see his armor's integrity failing. I could see his vital signs dropping. I begged him to move, to save himself. Do you know what he said to me? Dong-jun's voice shook. He said, just work faster. Ensign. I can hold a door. You have to save a world. Like it was nothing. Like his bones were not breaking. Like he was not dying right there in front of me. He looked down at his injured arm. When I finished the override, the door sealed properly. I tried to go back for him, to help him, but he had already gone, dragging his broken leg, his armor barely functioning, heading toward the fortress. Alone. Because that was the mission. And Captain Taiwan never abandons a mission. The prosecutor stood. Captain, you knew about the Kethrian younglings, the Krell students. All of them. Why did you not mention this immediately? Why did you not use it in your defense? Taiwan looked at him steadily. Because it should not matter. The 2.3 million humans on that world were reason enough. I did not save those people because some of them were Kethrian or Krell or Vrelian. I saved them because they were alive. Because they deserved to remain alive. Their species is irrelevant. The Vrelian ambassador's light flickered. When he spoke, his musical voice was heavy with emotion. Captain Taiwan, I mocked you. I called your armor broken toys. I called your people primitive, and all the while, you had saved 22 of my species without even mentioning it. I owe you an apology that I cannot adequately express. You owe me nothing, Taiwan said. Your job, the Kethrian warlord repeated. He moved down from his platform, his 6 legs carrying him slowly to where Taiwan stood. Your job was to protect humans. You could have evacuated. You could have run. But you stayed. You endured agony. You nearly died. To save not just your people, but mine. 312 of my younglings are alive. Because you decided their lives were worth your pain. He stopped in front of Taiwan. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and began removing his own chest plate. In Kethrian culture, removing armor in front of another warrior was a sign of profound respect. A display of vulnerability that said, I trust you, I honor you. The plate came away, revealing the softer carapace beneath. The warlord bowed his head. I called you vermin, he said quietly. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. The matriarch raised one of her forearms. The gesture brought immediate silence to the assembly hall. She stood before Taiwan, this human warrior who had destroyed her fortress and saved her students in the same action. Her purple exoskeleton caught the light from the crystal walls. But there was no anger in her posture now. I request a recess, she said. Her voice was steady but quiet. 1 hour. The tribunal must deliberate on what we have heard. The head judge nodded. Granted. The tribunal will reconvene in 1 hour to deliver the verdict. The delegates began to file out, speaking in hushed tones to each other. But many of them paused as they passed Taiwan. Some nodded. Some touched their chests in gestures of respect from their cultures. The Vrelian ambassador stopped completely and dimmed his light, a sign of deep apology in his species. Taiwan stood alone in the center of the hall, surrounded by the scattered pieces of his armor. Ambassador Yujin wanted to go to him, to say something. But she did not know what words could possibly be adequate. Instead, she stayed in her seat and watched as he slowly, painfully, began to put his armor back on. Each piece was a weight, not just physical, but emotional. He was choosing to carry the burden again, knowing what it had cost him. Knowing what it might cost him in the future. The hour passed slowly. When the tribunal reconvened, every delegate was present. No one wanted to miss this. The mood in the hall was completely different from the beginning. Where there had been mockery and contempt, now there was something else. Respect, understanding, and for some species, shame at how they had acted. The matriarch spoke first. She stood at her full height, all 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of formal address. I came to this tribunal seeking justice, she began. I believed that Captain Taiwan was a murderer, that he had destroyed the Krell fortress station out of hatred or cruelty or weakness. I demanded that he be punished, that his species be punished. She lowered her arms slowly. I was wrong. The fortress commanders made a decision that violated every principle of Krell honor. They threatened civilians. They aimed weapons of mass destruction at innocents, and when Captain Taewon tried to stop them, they did not cease. They did not negotiate. They forced him to make an impossible choice. The matriarch's voice grew stronger. He chose to save the most lives he could. He gave my people time to evacuate. He risked his life, his sanity, his very survival to make sure that as many would live as possible. This is not murder. This is the highest form of honor. She turned to face the other delegates. I withdraw all charges against Captain Taewon. Furthermore, I formally apologize to him and to all of humanity for what my fortress did. The commanders who gave that order have been removed from their positions. They will face Krell justice for their crimes. The hall was silent. Then the Kethrian warlord stood. I also must speak, he said. His voice carried across the hall, deep and resonant. I called this human vermin. I said he had no honor. I looked at his damaged armor and saw weakness. I could not have been more blind. He walked to the center of the hall, standing beside the matriarch. 312 Kethrian younglings are alive because of Captain Taewon. He did not know them. He had never met them. They were not his responsibility, and yet he decided they were worth saving, that their lives had value equal to his own people's lives. The warlord's carapace gleamed as he turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. In Kethrian culture, we honor warriors who show strength in battle, but true strength is not in how hard you can strike. It is in what you are willing to endure for others. Captain Taewon showed strength beyond anything I have witnessed in my 400 years of life. He removed his chest plate again, holding it out toward Taewon. I offer my armor as tribute. It is undamaged. Perfect. And it means nothing compared to your scarred, broken armor that saved thousands. The Vrelian ambassador floated to join them. His energy form pulsed with emotion. I mocked this human. I laughed at his appearance. I called his technology primitive. And all the while, 22 of my species owe their lives to him. I did not even know they were on Threshold 4 until today. But he knew. And he saved them anyway. His light grew brighter. The Vrelian Collective wishes to propose that Captain Taewon be awarded the Star of Valor. This is the highest military honor our galactic community can bestow. It has never been given to a human before. It is long overdue. One by one, other delegates stood. The Therians, the crystalline beings, species that had been silent before, now spoke, each offering their support, each acknowledging that they had been wrong. The prosecutor, who had presented the charges against Taewon, approached the judge's platform. The prosecution withdraws all charges. Furthermore, I recommend that Earth be granted full voting status in the Assembly, effective immediately. They have more than proven their worthiness. The head judge looked at Taewon. The ancient being's face was difficult to read, but there was something in his eyes that might have been approval. Captain Taewon, the tribunal finds you innocent of all charges. The destruction of the Krell Fortress Station was an act of defense, not aggression. You acted to prevent a greater tragedy, and you did so at tremendous personal cost. This tribunal honors your sacrifice. He gestured, and a holographic medal appeared above Taewon. The Star of Valor, glowing softly in the air. By unanimous vote of the Assembly, you are awarded the Star of Valor for actions above and beyond any reasonable expectation of duty. You saved millions of lives across multiple species. You embodied the highest ideals of what it means to be a warrior, and you did so while showing mercy even to those who were trying to kill you. The entire assembly stood. Every delegate, every species. They stood in silence. Not the silence of mockery that had greeted Taewon when he arrived, but the silence of profound respect. Taewon stood in his damaged armor and accepted the honor with a simple nod. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He looked tired, worn, like someone who had carried a great weight and knew he would have to carry it again. Ambassador Yujin finally allowed herself to approach him. You did it, she said softly. You showed them who we are. Taewon looked at her. I showed them who we can be. That is all. The crew is waiting for you, she said. Hana and Dongjun, the others. They want to see you. I know. I will go to them. He touched his damaged chestplate. But first, I need to have this armor repaired. There will be other battles, other missions. Yujin wanted to tell him he had earned rest, that he should recover, should heal before taking on more. But she knew he would not listen. This was who he was. This was what made him both heroic and tragic. As Taewon walked toward the exit, the delegates parted to let him pass. Some reached out to touch his armor as he went by, wanting to feel the metal that had survived so much, wanting to connect, even briefly, with the story those scars told. The matriarch stopped him at the door. Captain, before you go, I have a question. Yes? If you faced the same situation again, if you knew the pain it would cause you, the injuries, the trauma, would you still do it? Taewon did not hesitate. Yes, every time, because the alternative is unacceptable. She nodded slowly. That is what I thought. What I hoped. Thank you, Captain Taewon. Thank you for showing us what honor truly means. He left the assembly hall in his battered armor, the Star of Valor transmitted to his combat record. Behind him, the delegates began to talk among themselves. But the tone was completely different. They were not discussing whether humanity belonged among them anymore. They were discussing how they could learn from humanity, how they could embody the same principles that Taewon had shown. Lieutenant Hana was waiting at the medical station when Taewon arrived. She was out of bed now, walking with a cane but mobile. When she saw him, she straightened and saluted. Captain, good to have you back, sir. He returned the salute, then pulled her into a careful hug. Good to see you on your feet, Lieutenant. The crew wants to see you. We have something to show you. She led him to the observation deck. Through the massive windows, Taewon could see a ship in the dock. It was new, the hull still shining, similar in design to the Indomitable, but larger, better armed. They are calling her the Indomitable II, Hana said. Built specifically for us. The assembly voted to fund it as thanks for what we did. She has the best armor Earth can manufacture. The best shields. The best everything. Taewon looked at the ship for a long moment. She is beautiful. Yes, sir. Though we figure you will probably wreck her in a few months. He laughed. It was a small sound, barely there, but it was genuine. Probably. But that is okay, sir, because we know why you wreck ships. We know what those damages mean, and we are proud to serve with you. Ensign Dongjun joined them, his arm still in a sling. The whole crew volunteered to come back, sir. Every single person. They want to serve under you again. Taewon felt something in his chest tighten. Not pain this time, but emotion. These people had seen him at his worst. They had watched him break and bleed and nearly die. And they still wanted to follow him. I do not deserve you, he said quietly. Yes, you do, Hana said firmly. You deserve a crew that understands what you are willing to do for others. And we deserve a captain who will do the same for us. Taewon looked at his damaged armor, at his crew, at the new ship waiting for them. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be more battles, more impossible choices, more moments where he would have to decide if lives were worth his pain. But as he stood there with his crew, the people who understood him better than anyone, he knew he would make the same choice every time. Because that was who humans were. Not perfect. Not the strongest. Not the most advanced, but willing to stand between the innocent and the darkness, no matter the cost. His armor was damaged. It would always be damaged. Each mission would add new scars, new marks, new stories written in dented metal and burned plating. And that was exactly as it should be.